evolution of my recovery, it's actually something, pretty special to me. And when they gave us this topic, I thought, what a neat topic to talk about, because I haven't really spoke about this, and I share bits and pieces of it like through other talks. But I'm not somebody who ever came to recovery wanting to recover. I'm not somebody who is like, you know what, some shit needs to change in my life, and I'm going to do better, and I'm going to start being a good father and a good friend and a good brother and son and all that good stuff. None of that was real for me. I'm somebody who was forced into recovery over and over and over again, right? I went to treatment. I think I've gone 6 times. Actually 7, no. But 6 times prior to going in 2020. And usually it was always to like, please people or get people off of my back or let me pretend, make you think I'm gonna be okay for now. But my intentions was always to come home and business as usual, just go back to getting high and slowly acclimate into my scummy life. And that's what I always did. In 2020, it was no different. My family, my girlfriend at the time, she found all of my drugs. And I thought I had this really stellar hiding place too, right? I put it up on top of the shelf in my bathroom. Nobody would ever find it there. And I was, what I would have called a functional powder cocaine addict for 20 some years, right? I had a job, I had all the things, but never, now in hindsight, there was nothing functional about it, right? My family ran the union I worked for, and it was really hard to fire me. So that was like a blessing and a curse, because I never had a reason to get better, and I always had money to pay for it. But then I learned how to cook it, and my whole world changed. Although what I even thought was functional became very unfunctional. I got very weird. I acted very out of my character, even for somebody who used drugs for 20 some years. I was with my girlfriend for probably 4 years, and she never knew that I used drugs because I was never off of them. And it wasn't until I started smoking them that she noticed some things were getting different. And she was trying to figure it out, right? A week before all of this happened, I smashed my car and my father's car, leaving the exact same trap house. And at that point, they thought, Eddie's really messed up. We don't think he's smashing these cars. We think he's giving them to the drug dealer, which wasn't true. I didn't smash the cars, and they come to find that out while I was in rehab. So my girlfriend knew that I was automatically going to say no. Shit isn't mine, right? You guys are wrong. And I did do that at first. But I needed a ride home from work. I had a ride there, but she would pick me up from work. And the day before she called my brothers, I noticed as we were driving, she put her hand on my leg, and I thought she was just being a sweetie pie, and that wasn't the case. She was feeling for the pipe in my pocket, so that when I said, no, you're wrong, she could say, stop lying. I felt it. And that's exactly what she did. So that night, I got heavily intoxicated. I went to bed. She called my middle brother, my brother Bill, and he rode his bike to my house. And he rode his bike only so that I wouldn't wake up to headlights. He thought he was being very sneaky, and he was, because I stayed sleeping. The next morning, I woke up to my girlfriend, my brothers, and their wives all standing around my bed. My first thought was, my parents aren't here. What's wrong? What happened to my parents? And they said, nothing. Why don't you come on in the kitchen and we'll let's have a talk. I said, all right. And I walk in, and as I'm walking in the kitchen, I see my kitchen table, and it's filled with the narcotics that they had found the night before. And automatically, I went into that is not mine. Screw you, God. Blah 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 blah. They said, Eddie, save that shit. We already got you a bed tomorrow. You got a bed first thing in the morning, and we want you to go. And if you don't go, this is where they came in with the ultimatums. My girlfriend said, Eddie, if you don't go, I'm leaving you. I said, goodbye. I don't want you in my life if I can't be myself, right? My oldest brother, I was a union contractor, and my oldest brother ran that union. And he goes, Eddie, if you don't go, you'll never work for the millwrights again. I said, fuck the millwrights, basically. I said, I don't need to work, I'm good. My middle brother, however, is a was a pretty well-known defense attorney in the state. And he said, Eddie, you're gonna get clean either way, because I already called my cop friends and they're just waiting for one more call. And your choice is that you can either take this bed in the morning or I'm gonna have to pick you up and you could go sit there and get clean. And I wanted to yell at him the most. I was so mad at him. And I stopped and I said, when the hell are we going to rehab in the morning? You know, it sounds good. Let's do that. And my detox there, most detoxes are 5 days. I was probably there for 10 to 12 days. I was very sick. They said at the time I went in that my body was addicted to every drug family. And after using the bathroom on myself and throwing up everywhere and just having the most disgusting, sick, horrible, sweating brown, it was just the worst feeling I could ever imagine. And after that, I started going to the groups. There was a guy at this treatment center, man. This guy could have been a televangelist for recovery. This guy could have done it on TV. He was that good with his groups. And it was exactly what I needed. That place was exactly what I needed at that moment. And for the first time in my life, and not to mention this treatment center was hours away. When I said I went like 4 or 5, 6 times before, it's because I left. I never stayed 4 or 5, 6 times. I would leave. I'd stay there for 2 days, and I'd come home and tell my family, oh, I'm a changed man. Everything's gonna be different, with no intentions of changing anything. For the first time in my life, because nobody wants to pick you up 3 hours away, none of your good drug buddies feel like doing that, I sat there. There was no way out of this one for me. I was stuck. And thank God that I was. Right? Because some real magical shit happened at that treatment center. For the first time in my life, I felt this clarity, right? And it was overwhelming. I don't hate not being high. That's weird. You know, I was somebody that's completely terrified of change. Even today, I hate when shit changes in my regimen. You know, but eventually the pain of things staying the same got greater than my fear of change, and I stuck it out there. And the day I left, that guy that taught that stellar group, he told me, he goes, Eddie, do me one favor. And I used to be loyal to the wrong people to a fault. So to this guy, I would have jumped in front of a bus. I said anything. He goes, I want you to go to a 12-step meeting tonight, as soon as you get home. And I did. And I found my program that night. Now, did I think the program was weird at first with all the hugging and praying and doing all that stuff? I thought it was totally bizarre. You know, but it took a couple times going, and I just kept going. And then I found what used to be my home group, and at that time, there was 100 people there on a Monday. And when you get up to finally surrender to the program, or get your key tag, or whatever you want to do with that, there was a line of 100 people that wanted to hug you and say, welcome, we love you. You know, I'm so glad you're here. You know, times are a little different, but it's the same program. You know, that program saved my life. That treatment facility and that program and a very small few of the people in that program saved my life. You know, one of them sitting here. So, you know, so I did that. I kept going, and I did all the surface level stuff. So this is where the evolution came in, right? I started doing all the surface level shit. They told me get a sponsor, do the service positions, do your step work, blah, 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 and I did all of that. I didn't retain any of it. I was doing it just so I could say I was doing it, because my whole life I was kind of a piece of shit, and now people are like, look at Eddie go. And I started feeding off of that. So that was my recovery early on. Pat me on the back, tell me how good I'm doing. I want you to see me doing this stuff, right? The service positions, again, like I was the greeter at my home group for a long time. And as everybody walked in, I'd give them a hug. We'd be high-fiving after the meeting. I treated everybody so great, then I'd go home and I'd still verbally terrorize everybody I loved. Because at that point, I was just clean. You know, I was by no means recovery. And I wasn't interested in that. I was feeding my ego. And that became a dangerous place. So another part of the evolution is that I started working in recovery. I worked for treatment centers. I worked as a peer coach. I did all the stuff. But my personal recovery never changed up, right? And I got very complacent. I got very comfortable just being clean and just doing the look at me bullshit that a lot of people do in recovery. recovery, unfortunately. And when I got complacent, and when I got high, I was working at a treatment center, and I'd teach groups and tell these guys, I have 0 reservations. Nothing can take me out. And I learned that that was the dumbest thing I could have ever said. Because after nearly 5 years of being around my program and doing all the things at the bare minimum, all the surface level shit, real life started happening. And I said earlier that I was worried that something happened to my family, right? My parents. Me and my dad, who we used together for 20 years, we had a weird relationship. We were best friends, to the craziest extremes of being best friends. And then he got sick. And when I found recovery, because I was clean, I started looking down at him. How could you get high with your child? And I treated him like shit. And I talked to him like he bothered me. Instead of making memories the last couple of years of his life, I resented him. Because early in recovery, a lot of us come in as victims, right? It's your fault that I was getting high. My father never once shoved cocaine up my nose. Never once. In his head, a person who was sick, just like I was sick, was bonding with their child. He was never malicious, right? And there's an IP called IP number 12 in my program. It's called the Triangle of Self-Obsession. And I had to break it down. I had to read it 100 times. And what that IP really shows you is how to turn your resentments into acceptance. And after doing some real work with a sponsor, I was able to stop doing this so much, and it became this. I was like, oh, I'm a piece of shit still. I need to do some work around here. And we rekindled our relationship before he passed. We were best friends again. But for the first time, I had a father and not a best friend. And then I felt like God just took him from me. Boom, he's gone. And seeing the strongest person I've ever known in my entire life turn into the weakest. Maybe moving in with him wasn't the best idea at that time. Because it was the hardest thing I ever went through. And I'm not, that's an excuse if I say that that's why I got high, because that's not. I got high because I stopped doing all the things at work. Even if it was surface level shit, I was there doing it, and it worked. And I didn't fall onto my people. I stopped. They say, you just got to pick up the phone if you feel like all I had to do was answer it. Because people are like, where the fuck are you? And I didn't do any of that. And after all that shit I talked at my jobs and everything, I have no reservations. Nothing can take me out. I went right back out after nearly 5 years. In 2 months, I'll have 2 years again. It's so my evolution was up and down and up and down. And today we're doing some really cool stuff. But when I came back into this program for the first time in my life, I was taking it a little more serious, and I had a little more respect for my recovery, right? This shit is not a game. The stuff that we do and the stuff that we're learning and our lives in general, this is not something we should be playing with. And I had to learn that the hard way. Because after 5 years of recovery, they say, the program blows your buzz. That is true. At least those 25 years I was getting high before that, I never had any of this. And after working in recovery and having all kinds of nice things, and doing all this stuff after almost 5 years, being back on that milk crate, I didn't just want to fucking get high. I wanted it to kill me at that point. And finally, I called my cut man. After the pain gets great enough, I called my brother right here. And for the first time in my entire recovery, I worked to step one. And I admitted I was powerless and that I was stuck. And him and a couple other people acted very quickly, and they got me into treatment. I went for a couple days somewhere. I came back, got high right away. I went somewhere a little less nice where I could humble myself a little more. And that's exactly what I needed at the moment. And I've been clean ever since. It's embarrassing to admit a lot of this stuff. The only reason I bring it up today is because that's just a part of the evolution of my recovery. I had to play the game long enough to kind of stay clear. But once the real shit happened in my life, and I fell back down and I remembered that pain, that's a pain that I don't believe I can forget today. Not to say I couldn't get high. That's a pain I'll never forget. And the worst part about it is, as my father was dying, I didn't get high the day he died. I got high the month before he died. And he knew I was getting high. And the day before he passed, he goes, Eddie, he pushed all my family out of the room. It's just me and him. He goes, you need to tighten up, bro. He goes, I see it all over your face. I know what you're doing. I could say, no, you're wrong. And I went out that night. I left the hospital. Instead of staying with him, I left the hospital thinking I was going to have another conversation with him in the morning. Went out till like 3 o'clock, and at 5 o'clock I had a phone call saying, you got to get there, Dad's gone. But I'm also a firm believer of my higher power in my program. And maybe some of that is only because I want to believe with all my heart that he can see what's going on today. Since then, like I said, I have a whole different respect for my program. I have a whole different respect for my recovery and for the people that do this alongside me. And since then, we've been doing the thing. I've worked for a lot of recovery organizations, and we felt like it was time to kind of do our own thing. And today, we started a company called Michigan Recovery Movement, where we get to help a whole lot of people today. And the biggest reason that I do that is because so many people did that shit for me. And I think it would be a real scumbag move on my part not to return that. Because another big part of my program is our primary purpose, and that's to carry the message to the addict that still suffers. And that's something I take very fucking seriously. Even if we lost the building, even if we lost everything, I would do it out of my bedroom and work another job if I had to, but this is never gonna go away. And this isn't, all that look at me shit's dead. This is, now look at these guys. They're killing it. There's nothing more humbling and refreshing than seeing somebody come into my office, broken, beat up, because I know that fucking feeling all so well. See them just demolished, right? And after time, you just watch them become a winner. Oh, that's better than any. There's no dollar, or there's nothing you could put on that other than what we get out, like just watching people, live. We don't save anybody. None of these places save anybody. What we do is we give tools. And it's up to those people to use the tools. But when you watch them using them tools, it's just pretty awesome. And I plan on doing this for the rest of my life. So that's the evolution of my recovery. Thank you guys for having us here today. Yeah. And I just want to mention that these two guys, this is my vice chairman, that's my chairman for Michigan Recovery Movement. And I couldn't be more proud to sit alongside with all of you guys. That was great. I'm blessed to be able to do shit like this today. I'm just glad that I'm not one of those fucking Facebook posts, which really could have happened just a couple years ago. A Facebook post that you forget about in a week, and people would pretend like they cared so much.
It'll be apnea.
It would be apnea. It won't be drugs. My apnea is horrible. But thank you guys. That's all I got.
Thanks, brother.